Sarah Martinez had always dreamed of serving her country. Growing up in a small Texas town, she watched her father polish his old Army medals every Sunday morning while telling stories of honor and duty. Those stories planted seeds in her heart that grew stronger with each passing year. When she turned 18, Sarah enlisted in the Army without hesitation, determined to make her family proud. Basic training was tough, but Sarah pushed through every challenge. She ran faster, climbed higher, and studied harder than most of her peers. Her drill sergeants noticed her dedication, and fellow recruits looked up to her natural leadership abilities. Sarah graduated at the top of her class and earned her first assignment at Fort Henderson, one of the most prestigious military bases in the country. Fort Henderson buzzed with activity from dawn to dusk. Thousands of soldiers called this place home, working together to maintain readiness and protect national security. The base sprawled across rolling hills with neat rows of barracks, training facilities, and administrative buildings. Everything operated with military precision, and every soldier knew their place in the larger mission. Sarah arrived at Fort Henderson on a crisp Monday morning in September. She carried her duffel bag with pride, walking tall in her freshly pressed uniform. The base seemed enormous compared to the training facility she had left behind. Vehicles moved in orderly patterns along paved roads, and soldiers marched in formation across vast parade grounds. The American flag snapped in the morning breeze atop a towering flagpole at the center of the base. As a new recruit, Sarah was assigned to Alpha Company under the command of General Robert Hawkins. The general had served for 30 years and commanded respect throughout the entire base. His reputation preceded him wherever he went. Some soldiers spoke of his brilliant tactical mind and unwavering dedication to mission success. Others whispered about his harsh discipline and demanding expectations that left little room for mistakes. Sarah's first week passed smoothly as she learned the routines and protocols of her new assignment. She woke before dawn for physical training, attended briefings throughout the day, and studied regulations late into the evening. Her bunkmates were friendly and helpful, sharing tips about navigating life at Fort Henderson. Everything seemed to be falling into place perfectly. The trouble began during her second week when Sarah noticed something that bothered her deeply. During a routine inspection of the mess hall, she observed kitchen staff throwing away large quantities of perfectly good food. Bread that was one day past its best-by date went straight into dumpsters. Fresh vegetables with minor cosmetic imperfections were discarded without a second thought. Meanwhile, Sarah knew that the local food bank in the nearby town struggled to feed hungry families every single day. Sarah couldn't shake the image of wasted food, piling up in dumpsters while children went to bed hungry just miles away. She had grown up in a household where every meal was precious, and her mother taught her never to waste anything that could help someone else. The contradiction between military values of service and the reality of this waste kept her awake at night, turning over possible solutions in her mind. After several sleepless nights, Sarah decided she needed to take action. She spent her free time researching military regulations about food donation and disposal. She discovered that while there were strict guidelines about food safety, there were also provisions that allowed for donations to approved charitable organizations under certain circumstances. Armed with this knowledge, Sarah felt confident that she could propose a solution that would help the community while maintaining all necessary safety standards. Sarah drafted a detailed proposal outlining how the base could partner with the local food bank to donate surplus food that met safety requirements. She included research about other military installations that had successfully implemented similar programs. Her proposal addressed potential concerns about liability, food safety protocols, and transportation logistics. She even identified volunteers who would be willing to help coordinate the program during their off-duty hours. The next step was presenting her idea to the chain of command. Sarah knew this would require courage, but she believed strongly that her proposal could make a real difference in the community. She requested a meeting with her immediate supervisor, Sergeant Williams, who listened to her presentation with interest. The sergeant was impressed by Sarah's thoroughness and initiative, and he agreed to forward her proposal up the chain of command. Within a few days, word reached General Hawkins about Sarah's food donation proposal. The general's initial reaction was skeptical. He had seen many well-intentioned ideas from young soldiers that looked good on paper, but created complications in practice. However, Something about Sarah's detailed research and genuine concern for the community caught his attention. He decided to meet with her personally to discuss the proposal. Sarah prepared extensively for her meeting with General Hawkins. She rehearsed her presentation multiple times, anticipating potential questions and objections. She understood that this was a significant opportunity to make a positive impact, and she wanted to present her case as professionally and persuasively as possible. The night before the meeting, she polished her uniform until it gleamed and reviewed her notes one final time. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday morning at 10 o'clock in the general's office. Sarah arrived 15 minutes early, as was proper military protocol. She sat in the waiting area, reviewing her proposal and trying to calm her nerves. Other soldiers came and went, some looking confident and others appearing anxious about their own meetings with the commanding officer. When the time came, General Hawkins' aide escorted Sarah into the spacious office. The room reflected the general's long military career, with commendations, photographs, and memorabilia covering the walls. Behind his desk hung a large American flag, and sunlight streamed through tall windows overlooking the parade ground. The general sat behind an imposing wooden desk, his uniform impeccable and his expression serious as he gestured for Sarah to take a seat. General Hawkins looked up from the papers on his desk as Sarah entered his office. His steel gray eyes studied her carefully, taking in every detail of her appearance and posture. Sarah stood at attention, her spine straight and her gaze focused directly ahead. The silence stretched for several moments before the general spoke. "Private Martinez," he said in a deep, commanding voice, "I've read your proposal about donating surplus food to local charities. Sit down and explain to me why you think this base should concern itself with feeding civilians when our primary mission is military readiness." Sarah took her seat and began her presentation, speaking clearly and confidently about the benefits of community outreach and the positive impact the program could have on the base's relationship with local residents. She explained how other military installations had successfully implemented similar programs without compromising their operational effectiveness. Her voice remained steady as she outlined the logistical details and safety protocols she had researched. The general listened without interruption, his expression giving no hint of his thoughts. When Sarah finished her presentation, he leaned back in his chair and was quiet for a long moment. Sarah waited patiently, maintaining her professional composure despite the tension in the room. "Private Martinez," the general finally said, "this base operates according to established procedures that have been tested and proven over many years. Every regulation exists for a reason, and every protocol serves a purpose. When soldiers start questioning established systems and proposing changes, it can lead to confusion and inefficiency." Sarah felt her heart sink, but she maintained her respectful demeanor. "Sir, I understand the importance of following established procedures. My proposal works within existing regulations and would not interfere with any operational activities. The food donations would only include items that are currently being discarded anyway." The general's expression hardened slightly. "Private, you've been at this base for exactly 2 weeks. In that short time, you believe you've identified a problem that experienced officers and NCOs have somehow overlooked for years? That shows either remarkable insight or remarkable arrogance." "Sir, I don't mean to suggest that anyone has overlooked anything," Sarah replied carefully. "I simply noticed an opportunity to help the community while maintaining all safety and operational standards. The research shows that many bases have successfully—" "I don't need you to tell me what other bases have done," the general interrupted, his voice growing sharper. "Each installation faces unique challenges and operates under different circumstances. What works somewhere else may not work here." Sarah sensed the meeting was not going as she had hoped, but she pressed on. "General Hawkins, with respect, I believe this program could actually enhance our mission effectiveness by strengthening community relations and demonstrating our commitment to service beyond military operations." The general stood up abruptly and walked around his desk to where Sarah was sitting. She remained in her chair, unsure whether she should stand as well. He stopped directly in front of her, his presence imposing and intimidating. "Private Martinez," he said, his voice now cold and controlled. "Let me explain something to you about military service. This is not a democracy where junior enlisted personnel get to vote on base policies. This is not a civilian organization where everyone's opinion carries equal weight. This is the United States Army, and it operates according to a chain of command that has served this nation for over 2 centuries. Sarah felt the weight of his words but remained committed to her cause. Sir, I completely understand and respect the chain of command. I followed proper procedures by presenting my proposal through my immediate supervisor. I'm not trying to circumvent any authority or challenge any established systems. The general's face flushed slightly with anger. What you're trying to do is push an agenda that you think is more important than the judgment of your superior officers. You're trying to tell a general with 30 years of experience how to run his base. Sir, that was never my intention, Sarah said, her voice remaining respectful but firm. I simply wanted to present an idea that could help both the base and the community. If you don't think it's appropriate, I understand and accept that decision. Do you? The general asked, his voice rising slightly. Because your tone suggests otherwise. You seem to think you know better than the officers who have dedicated their careers to military service. Sarah took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. General Hawkins, I have the utmost respect for your experience and leadership. I presented this proposal because I believe it aligns with the Army values of service and community that I learned during my training. If I was wrong to bring this forward, I apologize. The general stared at her for several long seconds, his anger clearly building. You know what your problem is, Private Martinez? You think being smart and having good intentions gives you the right to question established authority. You think because you did some research and wrote a nice report, you understand how to run a military installation? Sir, I don't think I understand how to run a military installation, Sarah replied. I simply thought I had identified a way to help people while following all proper procedures and regulations. There you go again, the general said, his voice now openly hostile. Always having an answer. Always thinking you know better. This is exactly the kind of attitude that undermines military discipline and effectiveness. Sarah felt confused and frustrated, but tried to remain professional. General, I'm not trying to undermine anything. I'm trying to serve my country and my community to the best of my ability. The general stepped closer to Sarah, his face now showing clear anger. Private, you need to learn your place in this organization. You need to understand that your job is to follow orders, not to come up with clever ideas that challenge how things are done. Sarah looked up at him, her own resolve strengthening despite the intimidating situation. Sir, with all due respect, I believe that serving my country includes looking for ways to make a positive difference whenever possible. That's what I was taught the Army stands for. The general's anger reached a boiling point. Without warning, he reached down and grabbed a handful of Sarah's hair, yanking her head back sharply. This is what happens when soldiers don't know their place, he snarled, his face inches from hers. Sarah gasped in shock and pain, but she did not cry out or struggle. She looked directly into the general's eyes, her own gaze steady and unflinching despite the humiliation and physical discomfort. The office fell completely silent except for the sound of both of their breathing. For several seconds, the general held her hair tightly, apparently expecting her to break down or beg for mercy. But Sarah remained calm and composed, her expression showing hurt and disappointment rather than fear or anger. She did not try to pull away or defend herself physically. The seconds stretched like hours as General Hawkins gripped Sarah's hair, his knuckles white with tension. Sarah could feel every individual strand pulling against her scalp, but she refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. Instead, she maintained eye contact, her gaze filled not with defiance or fear, but with something far more powerful, disappointment and genuine sadness. Sir, Sarah said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper but crystal clear in the silent office. This isn't who you are. Those simple words hit the general like a physical blow. Something in Sarah's tone, in the way she looked at him with such profound disappointment rather than hatred or terror, made him suddenly see himself as she saw him. He was a decorated officer with 3 decades of honorable service, reduced to yanking the hair of a young soldier who had simply tried to help her community. The general's grip loosened slightly, confusion flickering across his face. Sarah continued to look at him with that same steady gaze, and he could see his own reflection in her eyes. Not the respected leader he had always believed himself to be, but a bully who had just crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. I know who you really are. General Hawkins, Sarah continued, her voice growing slightly stronger but remaining respectful. I've heard the stories about how you saved your unit in Afghanistan. I've read about the Bronze Star you earned for evacuating wounded soldiers under enemy fire. I know about the scholarship program you started for children of fallen service members. Each word seemed to cut deeper than the last, The general's hand began to tremble as he continued to hold her hair, but Sarah pressed on. That man, the one who risks his life for others and helps children get an education, that's who you really are. This person hurting me right now, this isn't the real General Hawkins. The office door was closed, but Sarah knew that the general's aide was stationed just outside. Other officers might walk by at any moment. Yet none of that seemed to matter now. This had become something much bigger than a disagreement about military policy or proper procedures. "You're better than this," Sarah said softly. "Your soldiers need you to be better than this. The army needs you to be better than this." The general's breathing had become labored, and Sarah could see sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool temperature in the office. His eyes darted around the room, taking in the commendations on his walls, the photographs of him with other distinguished officers, the American flag that had witnessed his moment of terrible judgment. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the general released Sarah's hair and stepped back. His hand fell to his side as if it weighed 1,000 pounds. Sarah slowly straightened her head, her hair disheveled but her dignity intact. She smoothed down her uniform and looked at the general with the same steady, compassionate gaze. "General," she said quietly, "I forgive you." Those 3 words shattered whatever remained of the general's composure. His shoulders sagged, and for the first time in his military career he felt completely and utterly lost. He had just committed an act that could end his career, destroy his reputation, and land him in prison. More importantly, he had betrayed every value he had spent his life defending. Sarah stood up slowly, her movements careful and deliberate. She straightened her uniform jacket and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. The general watched her every movement, unable to speak or move himself. "Sir," Sarah said, her voice now back to its normal professional tone, "I believe our meeting is finished, unless you have any other questions about my proposal." The general stared at her in amazement. After what he had just done to her, she was still maintaining military protocol and treating him with the respect due his rank. He tried to speak, but found that no words would come. Sarah waited a moment for his response, then nodded slightly. "Permission to be dismissed, sir?" The general managed a barely perceptible nod. Sarah turned with perfect military bearing and walked toward the door. Just before reaching it, she paused and turned back. "General Hawkins," she said, "I want you to know that I still believe in the food donation program. Not because I think I'm smarter than anyone else, but because I believe it's the right thing to do. And I still believe that you're the kind of leader who wants to do the right thing." With that, Sarah opened the door and stepped out of the office, leaving the general alone with his thoughts and his shame. The door closed with a soft click that sounded like thunder in the sudden silence. General Hawkins stood frozen in the middle of his office, staring at the door through which Sarah had just departed. His mind raced as he tried to process what had just happened. In the space of 15 minutes, he had gone from being a respected, commanding officer to becoming the kind of person he had always despised, someone who used their power to intimidate and hurt those under their command. The general walked slowly back to his desk and sank into his chair. His hand shook as he picked up Sarah's proposal and read through it again. For the first time, he actually focused on the content, rather than his irritation at being questioned by a junior enlisted soldier. The research was thorough. The logistics were well planned, and the potential benefits were clear and measurable. But more than that, the proposal reflected something that the general had somehow lost sight of over the years: the understanding that military service was about more than following orders and maintaining discipline. It was about serving something greater than oneself, about using one's position and resources to make the world a better place. The general thought about Sarah's words, about how she had forgiven him even as he was still gripping her hair. He thought about the disappointment in her eyes, not for herself but for him and what he had become. Most of all, he thought about her final words, that she still believed he was the kind of leader who wanted to do the right thing. As the afternoon sunlight slanted through his office windows, General Hawkins faced the most important decision of his military career. He could try to cover up what had happened, perhaps even find ways to discredit Sarah or make her life difficult until she left the service. Or he could find the courage to confront his actions and become the leader that Sarah still believed he could be. Sarah walked through the corridors of the administrative building with measured steps, her training keeping her posture perfect, even as her mind reeled from what had just occurred. Other soldiers passed by, saluting respectfully, unaware that their commanding officer had just committed an act that violated every principle of military leadership and human decency. When Sarah reached the bathroom, she finally allowed herself a moment to process the encounter. She looked in the mirror and saw that her hair was still disheveled from the general's grip. With careful fingers, she combed it back into regulation style, wincing slightly as she touched the tender spots on her scalp. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the emotional weight of what she had witnessed. Sarah had seen a good man lose himself to anger and power. Despite what he had done to her, she felt more sadness than anger. The stories she had heard about General Hawkins' heroism and dedication were real. The scholarship program he had created had helped dozens of children pursue their dreams. The bronze star on his wall represented genuine courage under fire. But somehow the pressures and responsibilities of command had twisted those good qualities into something ugly. As Sarah returned to her duties for the remainder of the day, she noticed that word was beginning to spread about her meeting with the general. Other soldiers gave her curious looks, and she overheard whispered conversations that stopped abruptly when she approached. Military bases were small communities where news traveled fast, and everyone knew that something significant had happened in the general's office. Sergeant Williams approached Sarah during the afternoon break. His expression was concerned as he pulled her aside for a private conversation. "Martinez, I heard your meeting with the general didn't go well. Are you all right? Do you need to talk about what happened?" Sarah appreciated her supervisor's concern, but she wasn't ready to discuss the incident. "Thank you, Sergeant. I'm fine." The general made his position clear regarding my proposal. "That's all that happened?" Sergeant Williams asked, studying her face carefully. "Because there are rumors going around, and the general's aide mentioned that the meeting seemed pretty intense." "The general and I had a disagreement about policy," Sarah replied diplomatically. "It's been resolved." Sergeant Williams didn't look entirely convinced, but he respected Sarah's decision not to elaborate. "You know that if anything inappropriate happened, you have options. There are proper channels for reporting misconduct, and you would have full support from the chain of command." Sarah nodded, understanding the implications of what her sergeant was offering. "I appreciate that, Sergeant. If I need those options, I'll let you know." Meanwhile, General Hawkins spent the afternoon in his office, unable to focus on any of his normal duties. Every time he tried to review reports or respond to emails, his mind returned to the image of Sarah's disappointed face and the sound of her voice, saying, "I forgive you." Those words haunted him more than any punishment or consequence possibly. The general had always prided himself on his integrity and moral courage. Throughout his career, he had been the officer that others looked up to, the one who always did the right thing even when it was difficult. He had counseled junior officers about the importance of treating soldiers with respect and dignity. He had given speeches about the Army values of honor, integrity, and selfless service. Now, in a moment of anger and wounded pride, he had betrayed everything he claimed to believe in. Worse, he had betrayed it in front of a young soldier who had looked up to him and believed in his leadership. The irony was crushing. Sarah had seen the good man he used to be even after witnessing the terrible thing he had just done. As evening approached, General Hawkins made a decision that would change everything. He picked up his phone and called Sergeant Williams. "Sergeant, I need you to set up a meeting with Private Martinez for tomorrow morning at 0800 hours, and I want you to be present as a witness." "Yes, sir," Sergeant Williams replied, though his tone suggested curiosity about the unusual request for a witness. "Should I inform the private about the nature of the meeting?" "Tell her that I want to discuss her proposal again," the general said. "And, Sergeant, this meeting is going to result in some significant changes around here." The next morning, Sarah reported to the general's office with Sergeant Williams at her side. She had spent a sleepless night thinking about the previous day's events and wondering what new confrontation awaited her. As they entered the office, Sarah noticed that the general looked haggard and tired, as if he hadn't slept much either. "Private Martinez." "Sergeant Williams, please take a seat," the general said, his voice lacking its usual commanding tone. "I asked for this meeting because I have something important to say, and I want a witness present." Sarah and her sergeant exchanged glances as they sat down. The general stood behind his desk for a moment, then moved around to the front, leaning against it casually rather than towering over them as he had done the day before. "Private Martinez," the general began, his voice steady but heavy with emotion. "Yesterday I committed an act that was completely unacceptable and contrary to everything I have sworn to uphold as an officer in the United States Army. I put my hands on you in anger, and there is no excuse for that behavior." Sergeant Williams' eyes widened in shock, but he remained silent as the general continued. "I want you to know that my actions had nothing to do with you or your proposal, which I have now reviewed more carefully. My behavior was the result of my own failures as a leader and as a human being." Sarah listened quietly, her expression neutral but attentive. The general took a deep breath before continuing. "I am formally apologizing for my conduct yesterday, though I understand that an apology cannot undo what I did. I am also informing you that I will be reporting my own misconduct to the Inspector General and requesting a full investigation." The silence in the room was profound. Sergeant Williams struggled to process what he was hearing, while Sarah maintained her composure despite the shock of the general's admission. "Furthermore," the general continued, "I have reviewed your food donation proposal, and I believe it has significant merit. I am approving a pilot program to begin immediately, with you serving as the project coordinator. I will personally ensure that you have all the resources and support necessary to make this program successful." Sarah finally spoke, her voice calm and professional. "Thank you, General. I appreciate your apology and your support for the program. I believe it will make a real difference in the community." The general nodded, then turned to Sergeant Williams. "Sergeant, Private Martinez will need to work with base logistics and the legal office to finalize the procedures for the food donation program. Please ensure she has access to whatever resources she needs." "Yes, sir," Sergeant Williams replied, still processing the extraordinary nature of the conversation he was witnessing. The general looked back at Sarah, his expression filled with respect and something that might have been gratitude. "Private Martinez, I want you to know that your conduct yesterday was exemplary. In a situation where you had every right to respond with anger or seek immediate revenge, you chose to respond with grace and forgiveness. That took more courage than anything I've done in 30 years of military service." The news of General Hawkins's self-reported misconduct spread through Fort Henderson like wildfire. Within hours of his call to the Inspector General's office, every soldier on the base knew that their commanding officer had admitted to an incident involving a junior enlisted soldier. The details were scarce, but the implications were enormous. For Sarah, the days following the general's admission were a whirlwind of activity. True to his word, the general had given her full authority to coordinate the food donation program. She found herself working with officers who just days before had barely acknowledged her existence. Base logistics personnel helped her establish relationships with local food banks. The legal office expedited their review of all necessary paperwork and liability agreements. The transformation in how people treated Sarah was remarkable, but also uncomfortable. Some soldiers looked at her with newfound respect, understanding that she must have done something extraordinary to prompt such an unprecedented response from General Hawkins. Others whispered behind her back, speculating about what really happened in that office and whether she had somehow manipulated the situation to her advantage. Sarah tried to focus on the work rather than the gossip. Within a week, she had established partnerships with 3 local charitable organizations and created a system for safely collecting and distributing surplus food from the base dining facilities. The first donation delivery took place on a Thursday morning, with Sarah personally helping to load boxes of bread, produce, and non-perishable items into trucks bound for community food banks. The local news media picked up the story of the military base partnering with civilian charities, praising the initiative as an example of community service and cooperation. What they didn't know was the personal drama that had led to the program's creation. Sarah made sure that General Hawkins received full credit for approving and supporting the initiative, never mentioning her own role in proposing it. Meanwhile, the Inspector General's investigation proceeded with military efficiency and thoroughness. Investigators interviewed Sarah multiple times, always treating her with respect and sensitivity. They also spoke with Sergeant Williams, the general's aide, and other personnel who might have witnessed or heard about the incident. General Hawkins cooperated fully with the investigation, providing detailed written statements about his conduct and accepting full responsibility for his actions. He made no attempt to minimize what he had done or shift blame to anyone else. His honesty and cooperation surprised even the investigators, who were accustomed to subjects who tried to deny or justify their misconduct. The most remarkable aspect of the investigation was Sarah's consistent response to questions about punishment. When investigators asked whether she wanted to pursue criminal charges or seek maximum disciplinary action against the general, her answer never wavered. General Hawkins made a serious mistake, she would tell them, but I believe he's learned from it and is working to make things right. He's a good man who had a bad moment, and good men deserve the chance to redeem themselves. Sarah's attitude puzzled many people, including some of her fellow soldiers who felt she was being too forgiving. During one conversation with her bunkmate, Private Jessica Torres, the subject came up directly. "Sarah, I don't understand why you're protecting him," Jessica said, as they prepared for bed one evening. "What he did was assault. You could probably end his career and get a huge settlement or something." Sarah sat on the edge of her bunk, considering how to explain her feelings. "Jessica, I'm not protecting him from consequences. He's facing an investigation and will be held accountable for what he did. But I'm also not going to destroy a man's life over one terrible moment, especially when I can see that he's genuinely sorry and working to make amends." "But don't you think he deserves to be punished?" Jessica pressed. "What if he does something like that to another soldier?" "I think the best way to prevent him from hurting someone else is to help him become a better leader, not to destroy him completely," Sarah replied. "Revenge might feel good, but redemption actually makes the world better." Jessica shook her head in disbelief. "You're either the most forgiving person I've ever met or the most naive," Sarah smiled sadly. "Maybe both, but I'd rather err on the side of forgiveness than cruelty." The investigation concluded after 3 weeks with a report that commended Sarah's professionalism and courage while documenting General Hawkins's misconduct in detail. The recommended punishment was severe but not career-ending: a formal reprimand, reduction in rank to colonel, mandatory anger management counseling, and immediate reassignment to a non-command position. General Hawkins accepted the punishment without appeal, understanding that he was fortunate to maintain his commission at all. On his last day as commanding officer of Fort Henderson, he requested one final meeting with Sarah. They met in the same office where the incident had occurred, but the atmosphere was completely different. The general, now Colonel Hawkins, stood when Sarah entered, and his demeanor was humble and respectful. "Private Martinez," he began, "I wanted to speak with you before I leave Fort Henderson. I know that my apology yesterday was just the beginning, not the end, of making amends for what I did." Sarah stood at attention, but her expression was warm rather than formal. "Sir, I hope your new assignment goes well. The Army needs good leaders, and I believe you're going to be an even better leader because of what we've both learned from this experience." The colonel nodded, emotion evident in his voice as he continued, "I want you to know that your food donation program is going to continue after I leave. It's been so successful that the Pentagon is considering implementing similar programs at bases across the country. You've created something that will help thousands of people." "That's wonderful news, sir," Sarah replied genuinely. "It was always about helping people, not about any individual recognition." "I know," the colonel said, "and that's what makes you such an exceptional soldier. You've taught me more about leadership in 3 weeks than I learned in the previous 30 years. As the colonel prepared to leave, he paused at the door and turned back to Sarah. "Private Martinez, I have one last request. Someday, when you're a leader yourself, and I have no doubt that you will be, I hope you'll remember this conversation. Remember that leadership isn't about never making mistakes. It's about having the courage to face your mistakes and grow from them." Sarah nodded solemnly. "I'll remember, sir. And I'll remember that good leaders surround themselves with people who have the courage to challenge them when necessary, even if it's uncomfortable." The colonel smiled for the first time since the incident, especially when it's uncomfortable. Those are the conversations that matter most. With that, Colonel Hawkins left his office for the final time, carrying with him lessons about humility, redemption, and the true meaning of leadership that would guide him for the rest of his military career. 6 months after Colonel Hawkins left Fort Henderson, the food donation program had become a model for military installations across the country. Sarah had been promoted to specialist and given additional responsibilities coordinating community outreach programs. The success of her initiative had caught the attention of senior Army leadership, and she found herself briefing generals and civilian officials about best practices for military-civilian partnerships. The local community had embraced the program with overwhelming enthusiasm. The food bank director, Mrs. Eleanor Rodriguez, had become one of Sarah's closest collaborators and strongest advocates. During a ceremony recognizing the program's success, Mrs. Rodriguez spoke about the impact it had made on hundreds of local families. Before this partnership began, Mrs. Rodriguez told the assembled crowd of military personnel and community leaders, "We struggled every month to meet the needs of families in our area. Now, thanks to the leadership and vision of the soldiers at Fort Henderson, we're not just meeting those needs, we're expanding our services to reach even more people." Sarah sat in the audience, uncomfortable with the praise but proud of what they had accomplished together. The program had grown beyond simple food donations to include mentoring programs where soldiers worked with at-risk youth, educational workshops about nutrition and budgeting, and even a community garden project on unused land at the edge of the base. The new commanding officer, General Patricia Chen, had fully embraced the community partnership model. Unlike her predecessor, General Chen understood that military effectiveness could be enhanced through positive community relationships. She often said that Sarah's program had shown her the importance of listening to innovative ideas, regardless of their source. During one of their monthly progress meetings, General Chen asked Sarah about her long-term career goals. "Specialist Martinez, you've demonstrated exceptional leadership abilities and vision. Have you considered attending officer candidate school? The Army needs leaders who understand both military effectiveness and community service." Sarah had been thinking about this possibility for months. Her experience with the food donation program had shown her that she could make a difference as a leader, but it had also taught her valuable lessons about the responsibilities that came with authority. "Ma'am, I am interested in becoming an officer," Sarah replied, "but I want to make sure I'm ready for that responsibility. I've learned that leadership isn't just about having good ideas. It's about understanding how to implement them while respecting the people you work with." General Chen smiled, recognizing the wisdom in Sarah's response. That kind of self-awareness is exactly what makes a good leader. "Take your time to prepare and let me know when you're ready to move forward." Meanwhile, Colonel Hawkins was settling into his new assignment at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. His role as a logistics coordinator was far removed from the command authority he had once wielded, but he approached his duties with renewed purpose and humility. The anger management counseling he had received, as part of his punishment, had helped him understand the underlying issues that had led to his misconduct. Colonel Hawkins had maintained correspondence with Sarah through official channels, always keeping their communications professional and appropriate. In his letters, he shared updates about how the lessons from their encounter had influenced his approach to leadership and personal growth. "Specialist Martinez," he wrote in one letter, "I wanted you to know that the food donation program you created has been implemented at my new base as well. Every time I see soldiers loading trucks with donations for local families, I'm reminded of the importance of serving something greater than ourselves. You taught me that true leadership means having the courage to admit when we're wrong and the wisdom to learn from those who challenge us to be better." Sarah always responded to his letters with updates about the program's continued success and encouragement. For his own journey of growth and redemption, she never mentioned the incident that had brought them together, focusing instead on their shared commitment to making a positive difference. One evening, as Sarah was finishing her duties at the community garden project, she received an unexpected visitor. Mrs. Rodriguez approached with a young girl of about 10 years old, both of them carrying small bouquets of flowers they had picked from the garden. "Specialist Martinez," Mrs. Rodriguez said, "I'd like you to meet Maria Santos. Her family has been helped by the food program, and she wanted to thank you personally." The little girl stepped forward shyly, offering her bouquet to Sarah. "My mama says you're the soldier who makes sure we have food when Daddy can't find work. She says you're a hero." Sarah knelt down to Maria's level, accepting the flowers with genuine gratitude. "Thank you, Maria. But I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who believes that we should help each other whenever we can. The real heroes are people like your mama and Mrs. Rodriguez who work hard every day to take care of their families and their community." Maria smiled brightly. "Mama says when I grow up I want to help people too. Maybe I can be a soldier like you." Sarah felt her heart swell with emotion. "You can be anything you want to be, Maria." The most important thing is to always remember that we're all connected, and when we help others, we make the whole world a little bit better. As Mrs. Rodriguez and Maria walked away, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. What had started as a simple desire to reduce food waste had grown into something much larger. A lesson about the power of forgiveness, the importance of redemption, and the way that one person's courage to do the right thing could create ripples of positive change that extended far beyond anything they could have imagined. That night, as Sarah prepared for bed, she received a call from Sergeant Williams, who had also been promoted and transferred to a new assignment. "Sarah, I just wanted you to know that I heard through the grapevine that Colonel Hawkins is being considered for promotion back to general. Apparently, his work at Fort Campbell has been exemplary, and his superiors are impressed with his leadership style and community engagement initiatives." Sarah felt a genuine sense of happiness at this news. "That's wonderful, Sergeant. I always believed he would learn from his mistakes and become an even better leader." "You know," Sergeant Williams said thoughtfully, "I've been in the Army for 15 years, and I've never seen anything like what happened between you and the Colonel. The way you handled that situation changed how I think about leadership and forgiveness. A lot of people think forgiveness is weakness, but what you did took more strength than any act of revenge could have." After the call ended, Sarah lay in her bunk thinking about the unexpected ways that life had unfolded. She had enlisted in the Army to serve her country, but she had learned that service took many forms. Sometimes it meant following orders and maintaining discipline. Sometimes it meant having the courage to propose new ideas even when they might be rejected. And sometimes it meant having the wisdom to see the good in people, even when they showed you their worst. 2 years later, Second Lieutenant Sarah Martinez stood at the podium during her graduation ceremony from Officer Candidate School. She had completed the rigorous training program with distinction, earning recognition as the honor graduate of her class. In the audience sat General Chen, Mrs. Rodriguez, and several soldiers from Fort Henderson who had requested leave to attend the ceremony. During her graduation speech, Sarah spoke about the lessons she had learned about leadership, service, and the power of second chances. She didn't mention the specific incident with Colonel Hawkins, but those who knew her story understood the deeper meaning behind her words. Leadership, she told her fellow graduates, is not about never making mistakes. It's about having the integrity to acknowledge our mistakes, the courage to learn from them, and the wisdom to help others grow from their own failures. The best leaders I've known are those who understand that true strength lies not in dominance, but in the ability to lift others up and create positive change. After the ceremony, Sarah was approached by a familiar figure in dress uniform. Colonel Hawkins, now wearing the eagles of a full colonel again, had traveled from Fort Campbell to attend her graduation. His presence surprised her, though she welcomed him warmly. "Congratulations, Lieutenant Martinez," he said, offering his hand with genuine pride. "I knew from the beginning that you would make an exceptional officer." Sarah shook his hand firmly. "Thank you, Colonel. It means a lot to have you here. I heard about your promotion back to full colonel. Congratulations to you as well." Colonel Hawkins smiled, but his expression remained humble. "I've learned that rank is just a responsibility, not an achievement. What matters is what you do with the trust that's placed in you. I'm grateful for the second chance I've been given, and I try to honor it every day." They talked for several minutes about their respective careers and the continued success of community outreach programs at their bases. The conversation was professional and warm, marked by mutual respect and the shared understanding of how far they had both come since their first encounter. "Lieutenant," Colonel Hawkins said as their conversation drew to a close, "I want you to know that not a day goes by that I don't think about the lesson you taught me. You showed me that forgiveness isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about choosing to believe in someone's capacity for growth and redemption." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "And you taught me that courage isn't just about standing up to bullies or fighting for what you believe in. Sometimes the greatest courage is admitting when you're wrong and working to become better." As the colonel prepared to leave, he handed Sarah a small wrapped package. "I have something for you. It's a book about military leadership that has guided me throughout my career. I hope it will be useful to you as you begin your journey as an officer." Sarah unwrapped the book and found a leather-bound volume titled The Art of Command, with an inscription on the first page. "To Lieutenant Martinez, May you always remember that the best leaders are those who serve others before themselves. With deep respect and gratitude for the lessons you taught me about true leadership, Colonel R. Hawkins. 6 months into her first assignment as a platoon leader, Lieutenant Martinez received news that would profoundly impact her understanding of leadership's lasting effects. The Pentagon had announced that the community partnership model pioneered at Fort Henderson would be implemented at all major military installations across the United States. The program, now known as the Martinez Initiative, was being hailed as a breakthrough in military-civilian relations. More importantly to Sarah, she learned that Colonel Hawkins had been selected for promotion to Brigadier General and would be taking command of an entire brigade. His reputation as a compassionate and effective leader who truly cared about both his soldiers and the communities they served had made him one of the most respected officers in the Army. The news filled Sarah with a deep sense of satisfaction, not because she felt responsible for his success, but because it proved that people could fundamentally change and grow from their mistakes. General Hawkins was now the leader she had always believed he could be, and his influence would positively impact thousands of soldiers and countless civilian communities. During a visit home to Texas, Sarah stopped by her childhood elementary school to speak to students about military service and leadership. As she talked to the children about the importance of standing up for what's right and believing in people's ability to change, she noticed a familiar face in the back of the classroom. Mrs. Rodriguez had brought Maria Santos, now 12 years old and thriving in school. After Sarah's presentation, Maria approached with the same shy smile she had worn when they first met in the community garden. "Lieutenant Martinez," Maria said, "I remember when you told me I could be anything I wanted to be. I've been thinking about it, and I've decided I want to be a teacher, so I can help other kids believe in themselves the way you helped me believe in myself." Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes as she hugged the young girl. "That's a beautiful dream, Maria. I know you'll be an amazing teacher because you understand how important it is to see the best in people." That evening, as Sarah reflected on the day's events, she realized that the most profound lesson from her encounter with General Hawkins wasn't about forgiveness or redemption or even leadership. It was about the interconnectedness of all human actions and the way that one moment of choosing grace over revenge, understanding over anger, could create expanding circles of positive change that touch lives in ways she never could have imagined. The little girl who had once thanked her for ensuring her family had food was now inspired to become a teacher. The general who had lost his way in a moment of anger had rediscovered his purpose and was now leading thousands of soldiers with wisdom and compassion. The food donation program that started with a simple desire to reduce waste had become a national model for military community engagement. None of these outcomes were inevitable. They had all emerged from a single choice Sarah had made in a moment of crisis: the choice to respond to cruelty with kindness, to hatred with understanding, and to despair with hope. It was a choice that any person could make in any situation, but it required the courage to believe that people were capable of being better than their worst moments. As Lieutenant Martinez prepared for sleep in her quarters at her new base, she thought about the letter she would write to General Hawkins in the morning, congratulating him on his promotion and sharing the news about Maria's dreams of becoming a teacher. She would tell him about the expanding impact of their story and how it continued to inspire positive change in unexpected places. But most importantly, she would remind him of something she had learned from watching his own journey of redemption: that the measure of a person's character isn't determined by their mistakes, but by what they choose to do after they make them. In choosing growth over defensiveness, service over self-interest, and humility over pride, General Hawkins had shown that anyone could transform their worst moment into the foundation for their best work. The story that had begun with anger and ended with understanding would continue to ripple outward, touching lives and inspiring positive change for years to come. And at its heart was a simple truth that Sarah would carry with her throughout her military career and beyond: that the choice to see the best in others, even when they show us their worst, has the power to change not just individual lives but the entire world.